All right, good evening. Welcome to the June meeting of 2022 of the Rocky Mountain Railroad Club. And go ahead and find your seats and make sure your cell phones are on stun or silent or something like that, so you're not interrupting the show. And it's a nice warm evening, but at least we got air conditioning in here and it's at least tolerable. And I guess that's all I got. You got some announcements, Dave? Do we have any new people on the presenters right here? Just guessed. All right. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Don Campbell. I used to be with the Rio Grande. Spent a few years there.
All right. Well, welcome. But haven't been here in a while. That works too.
Ron Gable, I think my number's like 87 or something like that, but moved way out to Elizabeth, so I haven't been able to make the meetings, but it's a pleasure being here tonight. So.
And all right, anybody on the other side here that's a visitor?
Hi, my name's David Jeans. I just moved back here to Denver. I'm a BNSF conductor and currently going through the engineer program here. So that's kind of why I got recalled back here. So nice to meet everyone.
Hey, also, no, I don't have any badge. I don't have any choice. Just the table full of calendars back there up for grabs. And those are courtesy of Ron Gable, who just introduced himself. So you guys thank Ron. And now that there seems to be plenty left, maybe you can even have 3 apiece. And I told him anything that doesn't get taken, he has to take them home. So he really wants you to take them. So, yeah, recycling. As Andy said, please silence your cell phones. You know, we don't want a sick Chip on you. You know, Chip, why don't you give us a little update? He's been to the Midwest. He can tell us all about the land of humidity.
I went out to Newton, Iowa, and excuse me. I guess we have to go on camera.
It's for the folks at home.
Yeah,
around the world.
That's right. Top of the evening. Anyways, went out to Newton, Iowa this past weekend. On Friday, they were supposed to do the test run with the Iowa Interstate 6988, which is a Chinese-built locomotive of 210-2. And lo and behold, our friend from Cheyenne was up there, Ed Dickens. They did get an FRA waiver because they're getting ready to do a 1492 inspection. Anyways, Ed rode the cab, and the Iowa Interstate did run their train from Newton, Iowa over to Silvis. The Silvis location is where the Railroading Heritage of Midwest America, say that 3 times real fast, has purchased the shop, which the Rock Island had. It's a humongous building, erecting building. Anyways, that's where the 6988 will get inspected and undergo its repairs if necessary in the coming months. Don't know how long it'll take, but also Ed's going to be delivering hopefully a couple of the donated UP equipment from Cheyenne to Silvis, hopefully later this year. Stay tuned. Unfortunately, the UP Big Boy has canceled its June 2022 trips right now, and they're waiting for approval from Omaha and to clear some backlog freight cars from the UP system. So stay tuned for the Big Boy. And then the other thing is, anybody know Mike Haverty? He used to be a president of a few railroads. Anyways, Mike's in town. He came in today on the 15-hour late Amtrak number 6, California's ever. And he's riding the Patrick Henry private cars, which are now in Denver Union Station for a day or 2. So been a busy couple days.
You want to take any questions?
Oh, any questions?
Questions for Chip? Because he knows all.
Yeah, right. Oh, everybody. Oh, go ahead. The Railroading Heritage of Midwest America is right, is having it donated by the Union Pacific to them with the provision in the contract that if the UP wants the locomotive back, they can take it back. So, and also the Centennial 6936 is going, and the steam engine 5511 is also going, along with 2 business cars. I think so, yeah. I don't have the whole list, but yes. So bottom line is, it sounds like they'll make 2 trips to get the equipment from Cheyenne, Wyoming to Silvis, Illinois. And they've been improving the shop, but currently National Railway Equipment still leases that shop. They've been using it for years. And the number of stored locomotives at Silvis has dwindled considerably. Imagine that. So anything else? Back to Dave.
All right. Probably time for Bob. Bob, come give us your pitch here. And if you stand here, they can see you on the camera.
That may not be a good thing, really. Thanks, Dave. Oh, okay. Yep. The Intermountain chapter of the NRHS invites our friends from the Rocky Club on 3 excursions that we're running this summer. June 25th, chartering the 2 Fort Collins trolleys for riding, run-bys, static photos, lunch in the Loveland train station trackside, where I'm sure we'll have a freight train or 2 go by. And then we'll wrap it up over at the Greeley Model Railroad Museum. Charter bus, that one's $39 a head. I do have a handful of flyers in the back for the 3 trips. Second one is the Cog Train, July 23rd. And we'll hit the Trolley Museum in Colorado Springs as well, with the lunch stop between those 2 events. And of course, we've got Como, August 20th. So charter bus, save gas, do the environmental thing, and relax as you visit your favorite rail venues. So any questions? I'll be here through the evening. Yes. Yeah, that's already come up once, and I will address that. If we fill the bus, we need to collect the full fare anyway on that. So the bus is going to be a lot more than it was in 2019. I know that. So any other questions? I will be here for the duration. So thanks again. Hope you can join us.
Andy wants to make an announcement about board members. Oh, what? It was Bill. Did you want to say something? Come on up here. You got to be where the camera can see you and the mic can hear you.
Okay. I just wanted to say to anybody here that's still active in photography and is still very interested, I do a ton of photography runs up to Crawford, Nebraska to visit Crawford Hill. And in the last few years, especially 2019, it was probably only about 7 to 9 trains per daylight hours that were operating. But there's been kind of an increase in traffic as of late. There's between 13 and 19 trains per day through there right now. So if you're a resourceful enough photographer and you're familiar enough with the area, it's still well worth the trouble to go. And right now it's just a spectacular, beautiful green carpet out there right now. It's just wonderful scenery, the best I've seen in a long time. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Sounds like a place without forest fires for a minute. So,
Yes.
here's Andy.
Just wanted to put another plug in that we are looking for a few more board members to join. It's a volunteer position, and we just meet once a month on a Zoom meeting, and typically the first Monday night of the month around 6:30, and usually meet for about an hour and a half to 2 hours. And we're looking for 1 or 2 more volunteers to come in and help. And we're also needing a person to do membership chair. Mr. Tenetti, who's graciously done it for many years now, he is now stepping down out of that role. So we need somebody coming up pretty quick around August, or even into September. And should we not be able to find somebody that's able to put in some time on that, we will likely be getting rid of the member number sequencing, because we just don't have the time to do it unless somebody really feels they want to do that. And so if that's important to you or important to those you know, we are definitely looking for somebody to help with that, and probably take a fair number of hours, maybe 10 to 20 a month or a little more while we're going through the membership drives. And it's essentially just getting the membership stuff out of the mail or off the emails and then inputting it into a spreadsheet or database. And then we also generate our mailing labels off of that for those that still get the mailed rail report, but we're definitely trying to move forward and be more electronic as we move forward. And on that same note, we're also losing Bruce Knoll, our one that does our well done membership or our weekly or monthly newsletter. Sorry, I got that right. And sometimes we double them up. The rail report, yes. I'm having a hard time here. So he will be retiring from that position here in December. And so we're also looking for somebody to kind of take over that thing. We've had a few people kind of express some interest. So maybe a team of people that do that. And kind of looking to go more, even more so in electronic format, possibly something similar to like the Railroad Museum's telegrapher, where you've got kind of a live thing with photos and some text and then even links that are able to be put in there. And so it makes it a little easier to format because the stuff that Bruce formats there for print and also just a live PDF, that takes a lot of work and special software and different things too to be able to do that. So we're hoping to maybe make it a little more modern, a little more simple. So if you're interested, let me or Dave or any of the board members know, and we'll hopefully get you hooked up with something that can help with. Over to you, Dave.
Yeah, like he said, most of us that are on the board have been here for a while, and we're sure you're tired of looking at us. So some new faces would be a lovely thing. And sometimes I get busy too, and we all run out of time. Yeah, he talked about newsletter. Also, if you come to our meeting and you join the club, and we will give you a copy of the club's history book. So there's an incentive to come to one of our meetings and join up. It's only $30 a year right now, especially if you're good with the newsletter coming in email form. That way you get your pictures in color. There's still a few people that want a printed copy, and I get it. It's nice to have a hard copy in paper, but they're black and white, and it's a little bit more labor for us. So the cost for being a member with the hard copy is slightly higher. Your mileage may vary. Yeah. Anything that needs delivery needs fuel, and we know that that's not cheap these days. Keith would be the person to go see because he's our treasurer. And, one of these days he's going to be tired of doing this too. So we do need volunteers. Coomers and Toltec has delayed the start of their season because probably most of you have heard that they have big fires going on down there in northern New Mexico. So they're pushing their start back to sometime in early February or early July. They hope they don't have to bump it back farther than that, but things are not good. And, since they have coal burning engines, they have to be careful about lighting things up. For those of you that watch on the internet, you've probably seen that most of the Durango and Silverton steam engines now have been converted to oil. I think they're only going to run their coal burners in the winter right now, as far as I know, but I'm not sure what the plan is on changing all of them, if they will keep one or two in coal or not. They also have some larger diesels now that can help them. And, you got to do that when it's fire season or you lose your whole season. Speaking of the folks in Chama and Antonito, if you guys are going down there for any reason, since they're losing a lot of business, the restaurants are going to be hurting, the bed and breakfast, like even our friend John Bush that came and did a show for us last fall, he's got a bed and breakfast, and now he's probably lost all of June. So if you can support those folks, that I'm sure they would appreciate. Yeah, 489 is the only oil burner on the Coomers and Toltec, and since they need trains to start from both ends every day, they don't have a way to cover that right now. So that was part of the reason they had to push back. Also, typically, we know that our formerly owned by the club Interurban Car 25, now owned by the city of Lakewood, they will be having an open house. There's not a lot of details yet, but it'll be September 17th. So if you want to hold that date, I know a couple of years ago, they had everybody do reservations online, not because they were charging, but just to kind of keep the numbers at an even pace. I know that the COVID numbers have crept back up again now, so nobody knows what it'll be like in 3 months, Yeah. So put that on your calendar. I already announced that Ron Gable doesn't want to take these calendars home. He actually brought a couple of things for show and tell, but only you real railroaders would know how to tell us what these work. So I guess people can come look at those later, but other than that, I don't have any other information. So Will, would you like to come up here? And Will Diehl is one of our members actually that lives in New Mexico. And he has graciously offered to do this show for us. So I'll let you hear it from him as to a little bit about his background and what he currently does for a living.
I like to just sit at home, watch TV. No, yeah, no. Well, as you, my name is William Diehl. You guys hear me all right? Not, okay, cool. Well, obviously the show is going to be about working on the Grand Canyon Railway, but I currently work as an engineer on Amtrak. I'm based out of Albuquerque. I work both directions on the Southwest Chief. So once a week I work to La Junta, Colorado. The other part of the week I work to Kingman, Arizona. So went from, you know, working on 40-mile-an-hour tourist trains, and I'm running now at 90. So, 1, 2, 3. It's more than 3. Yeah. So, yeah. Get out. So, well, I didn't get the clicker. I still got the clicker over there. So, well, we can start off with the, are we all set up for the online thing? Well, I just want to make sure, is it? Okay. Cool. So we're going to start off at the very beginning. This would have been a Memorial Day, or no, Labor Day weekend, 2006. I wasn't employed at the Grand Canyon Railway when I shot this photo. This would have been my first time actually seeing the 29 in action back then. Just so happened to drive north of town, catch it. It's a Pronghorn Ranch Road, small little ballast deck trestle there. So at the time, Grand Canyon Railway was running 2 trains a day between Memorial Day and Labor Day. The standard operating practice was the first train of the day went up as a diesel. The second train went up with a steam engine. When they got to the canyon, they swapped places. So the first train of the day came home with a steam engine. The second train of the day came home with the diesel. As part of the kind of the job, I don't want to say, and it was part of the interview, but also to show you what the job was, they sent us up on the train to the Grand Canyon. This would have been the next day after this photo was taken. And I drew the diesel. So rode the cushions up to the Grand Canyon, but rode the diesel on the way back. So at the time, Grand Canyon only had one working F40. That's ex-Amtrak number 239. So it was a nice ride. Actually picked up a couple things that from the engineer that day that I wouldn't say insane, but I yell at cows and call them cheeseburgers out the window now when they're in my way. So yeah, 15 years later, that still sticks. So next day, had an interview with the road foreman there and the train master. Got the job. They offered me a job as a PM switchman. So what we would do is take the train in at night and switch it. Yeah, that's the easy way of telling you. Go ahead and do another slide here. Oh, I got pointed at that. Oh, it's on. Oh, the arrow, yeah. I don't have to make a hit for everyone. Yeah, it worked literally earlier.
Make sure PowerPoint has focus on the laptop monitor, William.
Yes. Well. Okay, cool. All right. Back in business. All right. So this is roughly the midway point of the Grand Canyon. This would have been the weekend after my job interview, but a week before I started. My first official day working for the Grand Canyon Railway was September 11th, 2006. So this would have been actually Labor Day weekend. So this would have been the last weekend for the train or for the steam locomotive. What's that? I thought something about snakes. Like, no, that's not a snake. Don't worry. So Willahaw's the midway point of the Grand Canyon Railway, give or take a few miles. No, it's not. Yeah, but it's not the middle of nowhere, but you can see it from there. So actually a fun fact, the horizon in the background is actually the north rim of the Grand Canyon. So you can actually see the Grand Canyon from the Grand Canyon Railway before you're at the Grand Canyon. So you got to know what you're looking for, but it's there. Willahaw's out in the middle of, it's about 8 miles off of Highway 64. And this would have been 2006. And my dad and I decided to go get a picture here. So we took my stepmom's 5-year-old Acura TL out there, obviously without telling her because she got mad after she found out where we drove it. So here's 4960 at the crossing, getting a little closer. You can see I moved a little away from the track. Still late in monsoon season. Got some nice buildup coming up. This is what the Grand Canyon Railway was running at the time for their consist. Usually you had steam engine, the booster, ex-Canadian National Power car. The laser here, make it easier. They had the upgraded coach class, which was these demotored RDCs. Most commonly you'll see them online as Boise Buds. Most of them were Boston, Maine. They were demotored by Morrison Knutson. They ripped the roof bulge off of them. And other than the different roof line from the normal Bud coaches, some of them actually they didn't have the traction motors on, but they still had the gear on the axle to hold the actual traction motor gear. After that, we had the Southern Pacific Harriman cars, which were built by Pullman in 1923 for the Peninsula commute service. This next car was the Anasazi, which was a Southern Pacific chair car for the Sunset Limited, followed by the Grandview, which was I want to say it was the Silver Pony on the not the Rio Grande, but CB&Q. That was my favorite car on the railroad. It still had the original Zephyr seats in it. Most of the, like the Anasazi, the dome behind it, which I believe is either the Coconino or the Cocapelli, Northern Pacific or Great Northern Dome, they all had ex-Amtrak seats from the 70s. The seats in the Superliners are much more comfortable today than those were. A little bit more lean back. After that was the Santa Fe parlor car, which was, I want to say, a Minneapolis, St. Louis car. So it was towed behind their Doodlebugs. Actually, at one time, the car had a coal burning stove because with the Doodlebug, you don't have the steam generator for heat. And at the end of this train is, instead of the Chief, is the Max Biegert, which was a Canadian National business car. I believe it was the Bonaventure. This was the original Chief on the Grand Canyon Railway. It came on, I want to say 95. Would have been painted a dark Pullman green with a silver stripe. They had an electrical fire a few years before I showed up, and they had just pressed it back into service as I arrived. They had got rid of the burnt electrical smell, and they had actually put a dance floor in because they were running on a special train they called the Sunset Limited. They would actually take you up to the Grand Canyon in the evening. That way you could watch the sunset, and then we would run home at night. And the idea was to use it as a party car and have people dancing. They didn't tend to attract younger people like me who can dance while a train's moving. I'll just leave it at that. Yeah, wow. So here's the same train going back towards Williams. As you can see, the monsoon's about to start kicking in. So also, for those of you guys who follow my photography, some of this is not going to be my best work. So just, but oh, okay. So this is actually the weekend I started. So we caught here at Pronghorn Ranch Road. Wait, okay, date doesn't matter. Anyway, right before I started. So here it is, coming to Pronghorn Ranch Road. You can see this nice little hogback train has to traverse. And here it is coming up the crossing, and see the sunflowers in the shot. And yeah, so leaving town, you can see the old Santa Fe main line above the Harriman car there. The overpass was the original alignment for Route 66. So back in the 50s and up to 1960, that was the main line of the Santa Fe before the Crookton cutoff was open. So we're coming around the up to the north leg of the Y here. So there's with Bill Williams Mountain behind the locomotive. And like I say, it's not going to be some of my best, but I included this one when I started working at Grand Canyon. It was kind of a rainbow era for Grand Canyon Railway. This car off to the left here, this is an ex-Atlantic Coastline blunt-in observation. That is now the Chief, which is the usual tail end car on Grand Canyon Railway's equipment. And you can see the paint. They had the silver stripe, or yellow stripe with the red border on it. That was what they were doing. And you can kind of see the lettering in this photo, but it's yellow with a red border also. They were starting to paint the equipment with the full width yellow band here. But they were keeping the letters the same when I started. It was still the yellow with the red border. Again, not one of my best, and it's pacing it on the highway, but this is a profile of the 6773 showing its second iteration of paint. If you ever pay attention, actually it would have been the third iteration of the Grand Canyon. When it first showed up, it was all Pullman green. The idea was it was going to blend behind the steam engine. After Grand Canyon stopped doing steam all year round and running more diesels, they gave it a nice yellow stripe. When I worked there, all the Alcos, except for the 6793, were painted in this scheme. The 6793, which was out of service at the time, carried just the yellow stripe, no border. So here, as I started working, I went and I snuck out to Williams Junction. Williams Junction was where the Crookton cutoff takes off the Santa Fe main line. This was a station that was operated originally for the benefit of the Grand Canyon Railway. The only way to actually get on and off the train was to go to the Grand Canyon Railway Depot, wait in their hotel room, and then they would take you out to the train out in the middle of the woods. So you got your sodium vapor lights to keep down light pollution. We no longer stop there. It was always a hard stop as an engineer, but what ended up happening is the parent company for Grand Canyon Railway that owns it now decided that they didn't want to pay all the maintenance to run their buses out there, so they pulled it, not Amtrak. So if you want to, don't blame Amtrak for not stopping at Williams Junction. So I'm not just saying that because I work there. So went out on some of my days off. This was coming into, this is leaving Quivero, which is the first spur track at the time leaving Williams. So I'd go up there. And again, hey, you look on the horizon, you can see the north rim of the Grand Canyon. This is the furthest north stop where they pick up the cowboys for the cowboy show that they have going through the train. The other, if it was a shorter train, they would have done it about milepost 13, I believe. Quivero's about milepost 21. And I think, no, it's not milepost. Oh, wait, it is by the Chief. So it's milepost 20. Okay. Nice head-on shot there. same train, accelerating away. I was able to run across, and you can see the matched paint scheme on the two Alcos. Car behind it is the 480 power car. That was their, they took another Canadian National steam generator car and they converted to all electric, produce 480 volt HEP for the train. The other one actually also produced steam at the time, because when I started, the Harriman cars were still, half of them were still steam heated, which I may have actually accelerated the end of those. Because one night while switching, I forgot to unhook the steam trunks and ripped the steam trunk right off. And I don't think we ever used a steam heat on the Grand Canyon Railway after that. So after that, all the cars went in for electric heat. So yay, me. Oops. So got the Boise Buds behind it. When I was working there, they used the SP cars only during the summer. So if you want to ride in the winter, your only coach option was the demotored Bud RDCs, which have about as much romance as a bus. They put some nice motif in there and stuff with vinyl stickers, but nothing like, you know, the walkover seats and fans in the Harriman cars. So apparently, again, I ventured out to Williams Junction to try and do a little more photography. And this is probably where I start doing a lot more astrophotography in my career. So this is probably actually, I don't know, 2 minutes, 3 minute exposure, judging by the star trails. It's a single exposure. Now I just take a whole bunch of individual photos and stitch it all together. So here we got the 239. This was the only operable F40 at the time I worked there. Most of the crews loved it, and it was the only one with working dynamic brakes. We did have an engineer who actually refused to use dynamic brakes at the time. And as a PM carman, one of my duties was to change out the brakes. So I kind of always cursed him for always using without using, because he would never use the dynamic, because I was always having to change out brakes. Now as a locomotive engineer, I'm laying on my brakes a lot. So, but it's smooth. So this is right after a monsoon. You can see the ditch here's running with water. Nice glisten on the train. The F40 was also have air conditioning. The problem was you couldn't run the air conditioner because it was hooked up to the HEP. As you can see, there's an Alco in between the power car and the F40. So in order, there was no pass-through HEP at the time on the Alcos. And to my knowledge, only one has pass-through HEP. So you want to run the thing at notch 8, which obviously people would be frowning upon because that would just be waste of fuel to keep us cool. This is going back to the this same spot, looking back into Williams as it's going around the Y. I'm not quite sure why. I think we must have had a 2-train day that day, because there are no tail cars on the train. You can see it ends with the Anasazi, which is the SP chair car. I believe all in all, we either had 2 or 3 with, you know, the other 2 or other 1 being in the deadline at the time. And this one's the Anasazi. The next one that came out was the Yavapai. Grandview again. This was the Cocapelli, which was always stainless when I was there. This is the Bucky O'Neill. That was probably my favorite. We called them flat cars because they were single level. And while you only had coaches at the time that were the demotored RDCs, you had one Harriman in the consist. That was the club car. They took the normal Harriman car. They didn't change anything with the seating, but they ripped out the middle of it and they put a nice wooden bar in the middle. So that was the actual first bar car, I think, other than the Keokuk Chief, which they leased in the early 90s, that had a bar. This car right here is the cafe car. It's an ex-Pennsylvania Clocker I guess, cafeteria car, ex-Amtrak. So here was walking out again at Pronghorn Ranch Road. I got the Alco's accelerating, leaving town. You can see the advertisement of which a lot of rail fans didn't like. You can see we plastered the website name and the phone number on the locomotive, which was always what I had understood was Max Biegert, who owned the railroad at the time, was asking ways to get people to, try and ride the train, because they're always asking, well, how do we get tickets to ride this train? And they were brainstorming creative ideas, and apparently the CMO was like, sarcastically, why don't you just plaster it on the side of the locomotives? They did, including the steam engines. So, and this is a ditch. It's a very grand ditch. It's almost a canyon of sorts. One of the things I liked about working there is I'd go at the Grand Canyon basically anytime I wanted, and just get on the train. So rode out to the train up, went out to Hermit's Rest. This is one of the few places on the South Rim proper that you can actually see the river from the rim. You go a little further east, you can see it like a desert view, but generally, if you're in the South Rim Village, you can't see it. This is the Johnson Canyon Tunnel. Drove out there one day, just on my own whim, drove up the roadbed. This is what the Crookton cutoff replaced. This was essentially Raton Pass in reverse. It was 3.5% down. It was a choke point. This was all abandoned in 1960. They kept the other line, which is now BNSF's Seligman's, oh boy, Phoenix subdivision. So there is another railroad track that parallels this, but the Santa Fe, when they went to double track it, they found in the 30, 40 years after they had originally built the railroad, they found a better route, which required the railroad to climb uphill to be on the left side. So the Santa Fe ended up putting a flyover at a place called Pine Veta, which was between Ash Fork and Seligman, to establish left-hand running. So for some reason, the Santa Fe didn't let go of left-hand running and kept it left-hand running all the way to Belen after they built the double track. And because of the way they built it, they found easier routes. And so to this day, the Santa Fe Railway east of Seligman is essentially would normally be run as a left-hand running railroad. So a couple of years ago, to rectify their mistake, they spent a bunch of money and they put a flyover at Truxton, Arizona. So which takes us now from, we were going through there at 70 miles an hour at Truxton. Now we got trundled through there at 40, so we can go over the other track. Looking up at the keystone at the top of, I believe this is the East Portal. I don't know. Blantyre, most of it seems pretty worn out. Nobody knows anything about Blantyre on the Santa Fe, do they? Okay, cool. There's looking up the grade. Not much left. Rockfall, a lot of sagebrush. During World War II, they thought it was such a strategic checkpoint that apparently at Raton Tunnel and at Johnson Tunnel, they put guard shacks. This is supposedly the remain of the guard shack that was above Johnson Tunnel. Makes sure saboteurs didn't dynamite the tunnel. Here's looking down the grade towards Ash Fork. You can see all the cribbing and stuff, and it's all, it's stuff like steel, kind of like what the Durango and Silverton did in the 80s to reinforce their roadbed on the High Line. There's the truck I had, which was just a Ford Ranger. Not one of my best choices to slap a Rio Grande logo on the back, but I guess we can allow it since. Well, now, yeah, it does say Mazda, but it is a Ford Ranger. Mazda literally just took Ford Rangers and slapped the Mazda name on it. You pull up the hood and it says built by Ford. But, you know, I needed a truck. I needed a car at the time because my previous incarnation before I came to work for Grand Canyon was pizza delivery driver. And when I was delivering pizza in Tucson, this kid behind me decided that a stoplight didn't apply to him because he was probably high, and crashed into me about 50 miles an hour. So my little Nissan Sentra was totaled. I needed a car, found this one, and this carried through most of my time at Grand Canyon. So 2-wheel drive, and I was dumb enough to drive this thing from Yampai, which is the highest point between Seligman and Kingman, to Nelson, which, looking at it from the train today, I don't know how I did it, but I did it. I eventually got my dad's old GMC, which, well, it wasn't that old at the time, but I still have it. It's a 97. And no, I am not selling it. Looking down the roadbed again, abandoned Santa Fe Bridge. I found it interesting. It was still there. Carried my truck over it. So going back to the astrophotography, this is Pronghorn Ranch Road on the Grand Canyon Railway. So sometimes after work, I'd go sneak out north of town, east of town, west of town, wherever, just keep trying at astrophotography. So I ended up aiming to, down the tracks towards the Grand Canyon. You can see the rotation of the earth here. So I've actually tried redoing this shot, but it came out better. It's definitely not lit up with a flashlight like this one is. And knowing what I know now, I could definitely do it better. So here's, I would take my camping gear and go on the train to the Grand Canyon, camp up at the campground, the Rim. It was off season, so it was a lot easier back then to find a camping spot, and you didn't have online reservations to deal with. So finding camping was a lot easier at national parks in 2006. It's one of my favorite photos I've ever taken of Grand Canyon Depot, of the like 3 I've taken. So, but this wasn't quite a full moon, because there's another shot, same day. But one of the good things about camping at the Grand Canyon is you can wake up to stuff like this. So this is looking east towards the sunrise. You can see the, I don't know what you want to call it, not the Hog's Back, but this is what would be considered the East Rim. You have Desert View Watchtower right here, and this is kind of the easternmost point on the Grand Canyon of the South Rim. You see California condors. There was one roosting right below Bright Angel Lodge. There's in flight. That's the only real picture of a California condor I have. Well, this series. Every time I've ever been back there, I never managed to catch it. But they're there. Oh, there it is in flight also. So, yeah. Well, I mean, they started with 6. They only had like 6, and that it shows you how good of a breeding program is. I mean, at least they had unless they just randomly assigned the number 80 to it. But so I'm gonna actually go out and rail fan, and this is a place called Belmont, which is just west of Flagstaff. Again, we're still in the monsoon season, but looking at the flowers, they're gone. But obviously, there's still some moisture in the area. It must have been a relatively hot train, since it's got 4 locomotives and looks like it's all trailers. Flagstaff Depot. And trying my night photography. Because, it was either this or, go visit my buddies at NAU. And since at NAU, there's apparently a class that teaches you how to make fake IDs. It was relatively easy for 19-year-old us to get alcohol. And I never noticed this, but till right now, and it proves my thought, I know there was, but in 2006, the middle platform of the station was still there between Main 1 and Main 2. Would really love to have that right again, but instead of stopping, because anytime we have to stop at Flagstaff on Main 2, we end up spotting every single car. So what is normally an 8-minute smoke break stop turns into a 25, 30-minute. So this was a just a succession of photos. You can see passengers coming out. There's the chief, and there it stopped. So then I got in my car, head back to Williams, and then got a red light ticket because 15 years later, I still agree that, or still say that I didn't. Would actually venture out as far as Kingman because at the time they had a Whataburger and they also had In-N-Out Burger. So this is a little canyon just east of there, a Crozier Canyon, little bridge out there. I don't know. David, do you know about this place? You know about that guy trying to run people off? Looks a lot like you. No. Says this is his territory. No. So this is Crozier Canyon. It's actually a really nice scenic highlight. If you get to see it from the train, if you also see it from my train, something has gone horribly wrong since you should be going through there at midnight. Looking back up the creek. Back then, I guess, I don't think run through power was as big as it is now. So that was actually a really, I was excited. Now I really don't care about diesels. So this is kind of a trip down memory lane. You know what? This would excite me because, hey, look, a war bonnet. Or for some of you, a faux bonnet, because it was never painted as Santa Fe. The second one was. You can see me trying to get into pan shots here. Further back in Crozier Canyon, it's actually really towards the east end. So at night, we would take the train, we would run it around the Y, we would check the journals as they came in, see how hot they were. And if they weren't hot, no problems, we were fine. We'd take the train, we'd Y it. We'd park it on track 3, generally where we're at here in this photo, and we'd start breaking the train apart. If a car needed to go in the shop, we would take it to the shop. If we had to add cars for the next day, we would add cars. If we had to remove cars, we would remove cars. If the ticket agents who sold the train didn't like where we had put one flat car, that would be what we called the first class single level cars. Some of them didn't have bars in them, or some of the dome cars didn't have bars in them. So we would have to rearrange the train to their liking because they didn't want, two cars with bars next to each other. They wanted, bars spread out because some of these cars did not have bars. So this was shot after work because obviously it's not with a cell phone because it's 2006 and cell phones from 2006 looked like they were shot with a potato. This is a head-on shot. This is again the Grand Canyon Railways. This was their first FPA4. Had to do a lot of tampering with the color in this because at the time they were using the mercury vapor, sodium vapor lights to illuminate the yard. So everything had an orange tint to it, everything. So to get this actually decently in color is pretty good. So like I say, just come in middle of the night, just shoot stuff at night. So there, we're sitting there at night. You see we're idling. You can see the exhaust coming up. You can see some of the Harrimans off to the side. We would usually park them on track 4. They'd be slumbering there until Polar Express. And then we would use all 12 active cars, except for the club car, in service on the Polar Express. And those actually had to be a certain direction, arranged a certain way at the time too, because we had vestibules that were painted green. So the windows were blocked out so you could hide the Santa Claus during the run. And half the train was steam heated, the other half wasn't. So half of it had to be near the steam generator. Speaking of Polar Express, you can see the Williams depots all decorated for Christmas. They started at the end of September decorating this building. That's how many lights they had on then. And they've done a lot more since then. But this was the daily train. During Polar Express, we would back it in to the station. So this is actually the tail end of the train here at about 5 o'clock at night. You can see what I was saying about the letters. They were yellow at the time with a red border. And it still bugs me, my OCD, I'm pretty sure that A is backwards. I feel that. I don't. So now that I look at it, every time I see it bugs me. This was the Grand Canyon Railway's first steam engine. This was the number 18. It's Lake Superior Shipping 280. At the time, it was retired. Its last run was, I believe, 2002, when its flue time expired, and they never bothered doing the 1472. We put it up on display at the end of the station, and for Christmas, it got a whole bunch of rope lights and a fake smoke coming out of the stack. You can see that half the lights are burned out. So apparently, he sanded the flues, and it, you just have the one puff of smoke. This was January 1st, just after I don't want to say, probably not right after midnight. So this would have been January 1st, 2007. So pretty sure we went to the Sultana after work. This would have been end up being the first train on the Grand Canyon Railway of 2007. And we would do a charter service they had the Battle of the Bands marching band competition down in Phoenix. So as part of it, they would run special trains for all these high schoolers. And because it was New Year's Day, were probably already running 2 normal trains to the canyon. So we had nowhere to put it. So we shoved it onto the platform and left it on the platform overnight. You see the snow on the ground, Orion up above. And yeah, it's January 1st. We still have the Christmas wreaths on because we were still running Polar until January 15th back then. So one of my buddies at the Durango and Silvertick comment is like, well, we run once after Christmas, and that's just to take Santa back to the North Pole. So I was telling you about 6793, how it was out of service when I started. This was its first run after it had just been repainted. And you can see where it's picked up the new Grand Canyon silver paint scheme. It's got the wide-bodied, mixed up, gold stripe. See how much wider it is than the other one. And black lettering. All the lettering, numbers, letters, black. Everything on the Grand Canyon Railway pretty much now is painted silver. The stainless is painted silver. Black letters. So you don't have this kind of hodgepodge of paint here. So, but you can still see there's the Max Biegert on the end, the Grand View. This was about the shortest train we could run. One coach, one cafe car, the club car, one first class car, one dome car, and one parlor car. So that was the bare minimum to be able to cover all the classes of service. Back when it was a coach only railroad, they said they used to put coaches on just for breaks. Obviously, now it's really not too much of a problem. This was at Anita. This is coming down the long grade from Imbaloo, which is now, that's what it is now. Historically, in the Santa Fe days, it was Apex, which was the apex of the grade from Anita. But it's not the highest point. The highest point on the railroad is the Grand Canyon station. So it was just the apex of the grade. Coming into town, this is SP Road, which was short for Southwestern Pipeline, but it's spelled ESPEE. So if anybody wonders why the Southern Pacific has a road named after him at Williams, it's not because of the Southern Pacific. And there it is at sunset after its first run to the Grand Canyon in that new paint. So far they have 2 that are painted like this. The other one is 6776, which is currently on display at Grand Canyon. Looking into the sun at night. And now they have, I want to say it's a 6871, but it's painted silver also. So they do have a matching AB set today. So. And I need to clean the lens, lots of lens flares. Wow, I took a lot of pictures that night. I hiked out to past the yard limit sign, get this shot at night. It's out of focus. Still like it. And it was cold. It was probably about 10 degrees that night. This is at Maine. Again, I was definitely doing a lot more rail fanning with diesels at the time because that's all I had. Probably wouldn't do it today this way, but it's kind of neat to see some of the look back and see, you know, versus just all orange. I mean, we got a Ferromex SD 40 behind it. So this is Challenger. It's a control point. This is the first control point east of Williams. It's we call it Sleepy Hollow on the railroad. Got its name because back in the 70s, being a Santa Fe train, crew fell asleep, went around the curve off to my right, our right, a little too fast, and whipped the caboose off. And somebody, as a joke, went out there and put an actual, you know, they got the Santa Fe style station sign and put Sleepy Hollow on there. And the trainmaster in Seligman got a picture of it. It was actually in an issue of Trains magazine about 25 years ago. So there is a picture of it, but he had to take it down because apparently the superintendent was coming by on an inspection train a couple hours later. So it's like, there better not be a sign there. Oh, look, a train. So this is the Crookton cutoff. This is what the Santa Fe Railway built in the 60s to try and compete with interstates. They bypassed Ash Fork. They built basically a super railroad. It is all 90-mile-an-hour track between Williams and Crookton. Easy grades, even though, you know, I mean, you put in notch 8 and you hope you make up to 90 by the time you get back up to halfway to Williams. But this actually bypassed the Grand Canyon Railway. And so in the 60s, if you wanted to go to the Grand Canyon Railway on the train, before you used to just get off in Williams, do a cross-platform transfer, the Grand Canyon train, and off you went. After 1960, you would get off at Williams Junction, where the two lines split, wait for the Grand Canyon train, you'd get on it, then back down to Williams, then change direction to go to Grand Canyon. So this is let's see here, about milepost 400. So we're 400 miles away from Albuquerque at this point. This was the last day of the original, two of the original LS&I 280s. This is number 20 being loaded up in 2007. It's on its way with number 18 to go to Mount Hood, Oregon. They ended up restoring the 18 to run at Mount Hood, gave it its a quick 1472, and they used it for a season on the Mount Hood Railway. This is a preseason test run of the 29. So, which aside from the advertisement on the tender is mixed. This is actually one of my favorite looking locomotives. You got the LEM4 exhaust here. They changed it out for the old stack. I just, you know, clean looking locomotive. Even with, you know, some people don't like the twin sealed beams headlights, but you know, even in 2006, you're probably trying to find, you didn't want to carry, you know, low voltage locomotive bulbs. If you've seen some pictures from Durango recently, the 476 was sporting a white LED headlight. So they ended up moving that to the tender. So right now it has a regular one, but there's another test run leaving the yard or going past the Y. There is no water at the Grand Canyon for train service. Back in the Santa Fe days, Santa Fe had to haul all their water. They hauled it from a place called Puro, which was down near Prescott. And so until the 70s, the Santa Fe actually ran just trains full of tank cars of water to the Grand Canyon. And that was for the domestic drinking purposes at Grand Canyon long after steam had ended. You look at the geography of the area, the South Rim is the highest point, and you know, any water that's in the ground is probably just going to soak out the north side into the Grand Canyon. So for the water that's there today, they pipe it over from the North Rim. There's a pipe that comes from the North Rim of the Grand Canyon, goes all the way to the bottom and comes all the way back up. And some days, if you're there, they have problems with the pipeline. There will be no water, and they will ask you to conserve water while you were there, more so than we normally do. Not one of my best. especially with the wire in the way. Again, though, test run. This is up near Red Lake. So the previous one was at Pitt. So if this is from the highway, they must have stopped somewhere because I had enough time to go back and circle back around, which means they stopped. So I would follow this train all the way. Here's at Red Lake, which there's a siding there now because a couple of years ago, Grand Canyon was trying to run a matinee Polar Express. So they would take you during the day to the North Pole, and involved a meet with the daily train. So 2 demotored Boise cars, and looks like the next 2 cars are the Arizona and the Bright Angel. Those are ex-Pennsylvania Clocker coaches. They actually kept their last Amtrak seats in them. And some of the passengers didn't like it because seats didn't line up with the windows. They were set up for commuter service. And we actually used those on that Sunset Limited for the for coaches on that train because the regular passengers didn't like them. And when half your journey's in the dark, you don't need to see outside. So they put a couple of buffet tables in there. They actually served really good food. And I actually got to work as a fireman a couple days on that train on the Diehl. And so we got to eat a lot of really good food. Here's Quivero coming up. Nice little rise up there. It's always a good shot. A little backlit on the nose, but it works. There's coming up. This is Willaha. It looks like they're at. They must have stopped somewhere because I don't think you can get from Quivero to Willaha in one shot. So, yeah, well, yeah, we can't say that. So here's Imbaloo. This again was Apex. This was the site at one time also of the Saginaw and Manastee's lumber operations. There was a Y here that reached out probably another 10 miles to the east, past Tuzion into the woods, and they were doing a bunch of logging here. So you can actually, if you drive in here, you actually drive in on one of the legs of the Y. So the man running is Sam Lantern. He was the CMO at the time. By the way, he is not the one who suggested the advertisement, just so I don't throw Sam under the bus. Me trying to pan shot. Again, it was a test run, so a bunch of mechanical guys on board, so you can see them on top of the tender. Here's coming up to Pitt. We actually retained a lot of the Santa Fe station names, even though they didn't have a actual sighting. You still have a station sign. But we didn't use these to report. So they were kind of there just in the timetable and as signs for historical reasons, just to say we had them. There. So here's the inside of the 4960s locomotive of its cab. You can see it's getting warmed up for the day. You can see they put Amtrak locomotive seats on these things. So nice cushiony ride on the steam engine. So, oops, I didn't put that one all the way full, but same shot, different angle. There's on the ready pad, getting it warmed up for the day. The paint, you can see the reflection of the blue flag in the next to the number. So one of the cool things, like I said, I could just pretty much go out there and get pictures. 49, and remember I was telling you about the orange lighting. Everything was orange. So that's not fire producing that light. It's just sodium vapor lights. Going up the Grand Canyon. Red Lake again. So this puts it at least 2007 because in the winter 2007, 2008, this steam generator car was converted to be a normal power car like the other one. Be painted silver, put a Detroit diesel in it. Here's up by Imbaloo. Different day, obviously. It's a Quivero. Actually, I had to do a little playing around with this one to get it to work. The raw file wasn't quite the best, but winter. For those of you who've never been to Arizona, yes, it does snow. As it does, I grew up in southeastern Arizona, so I guess I was really enamored by snow back then. So go out, drive around, take pictures. Garland Prairie, which is south of Belmont. Got some elk. Drove out to Crookton, got a shot here. So this was actually in the final days of the Seligman Harvey house. This was the Havasu. Had a kind of a Swiss chalet architecture to it. The BNSF actually offered it to the city of Seligman if they could move it. They couldn't. So this is, unless somebody's got some other pictures, I think this may have been some of the last photos of the Havasu before they demolished it. So I believe it was like 2 or 3 weeks before. I'd have to go check the data on the file. There's some of the close-up of the architecture. It's a brick building, but up here you got the wood with the stucco in between. It probably would have been a really hard building to move. Looking on the main line, you'd still see some of the remnant of the platform that used to be there. And I believe that that brick may still be there. There is a nice patch of red there that does signify that was the platform, but I don't know about the brick. I know the red cinders from the platform are still there. And there's looking at some of the doors. So here's from the cab of the 239. We're about ready to blast off. And this is before when we EO26, when we could still have electronic devices in the cab. So we're going to go for a ride here, the Grand Canyon in the cab. I'll be in the fireman's seat. So here's looking up towards the yard. You can see we put a bunch of the Harrimans out on the, we called track, well, it's both on track 1, track 2. We must have, I don't know why they're not on 4. There's for some, I didn't take notes. Here's milepost 4. This is Dogtown Wash. They also call it Cataract Creek. If you go ride the train, and for the cowboy show, they're the Cataract Creek Gang. This is supposedly who the wash are named after. This is the longest bridge on the line. So going over it, you can see the snow melt is, we must have had a lot of snow because you can see there's water running underneath it. It was kind of hard to get water running underneath unless it was monsoon season, I feel like. And here's the North Pole. It's actually changed a lot since then. They put instead of having this Santa Fe style sign, it has Christmas, it's a candy cane. You can see the North Pole set behind it, which is just, metal tubing with Christmas lights attached to it. Now it's a whole elaborate set. This is about, you can see the milepost 17 miles north of Williams. And so I had one night, I also worked as a dispatcher some days. So they somehow trusted 20-year-old me to be able to dispatch trains. It's all TWC. So we were all track warrant, doing track warrants. I had to fill out the green sheets, all that stuff. Anyway, on my lunch break, somebody asked me, well, where's the Polar Express go? And I told them to the North Pole. And they're like, well, where does it really go? And I'm like, the North Pole. Obviously, I meant when I told them I was pointing north to and meaning the actual North Pole. But as you can see, it not only exists as just a sign, it is actually in the Grand Canyon Railway timetable. So it's one of those stations we don't use for references, so you won't get usually track warrants to North Pole. In this case, you can see where milepost 17 is. So generally, I think they would give a box 4, which is a work between, to milepost 18. That way they could just go back and forth all night. This is coming up to Miller's Wash. This is the low point of the trip. And not just because, there's no trees, but it is literally physically the lowest point on the railroad. In the 1920s, before this was realigned, they had a massive hailstorm. Actually, I want to say it's 1917. Ended up, I also want to say it was July. So much hail that it actually created a dam in Miller's Wash and caused a washout and derailed the train. And I believe the fireman was named Miller, and he was, I believe, crushed. So there's looking through Miller's Wash. I don't think you can see the original line. If you can't, I want to say it's right here. In fact, I'm pretty sure that's it. It was a lot. It kind of took more of the natural course through the here. In the 1920s, the Santa Fe just really straightened it, but it's still a 25-mile-an-hour piece of railroad. Back there, you can see the original roadbed, that dark patch off above the grab iron is the original roadbed. Climbing up out of Miller's Wash, you can see some of the lava rock they've dumped to the side as riprap. Here's Anita. This was the actual original terminus of the Grand Canyon Railway before it went to the Grand Canyon. It was originally built by Bucky O'Neill to access some of his mines in the area, and Anita was the end of the line. There was a branch that went up out here to some of the mines, and supposedly you could still see the tipple, according to Al Richmond's Rails to the Rim. I don't believe I ever saw it. You can see they had a water plug here at one time. Probably had water brought in from Puro. I'm not quite sure. There was a Y here, and you can actually see the leg of the Y coming across the crossing here right above this panel track. So you can still see it. Anyway, the mines didn't play out. They were caught with half a railroad. They sold the Santa Fe. The Santa Fe then punched up the hill to Apex and off to Grand Canyon. So here we're climbing up Imbaloo. This is was actually one of the more challenging places on the Santa Fe Railway, which is kind of hard to believe after you know where I run. They filmed it apparently in the 1950s to use in a Link locomotive simulator. So they figured if you could run this piece of railroad, you could run anywhere on the Santa Fe. Again, looking up, you can see the stairs stepping. There's the south switch at Imbaloo. Here's Coconino Canyon. This is a place where it's basically two horseshoes hooked together. Coconino Canyon, well, it's a canyon, doesn't really have any water in it. I mean, not like other washes in the area where you find a sandy bottom where water runs. Everything's covered in sagebrush. So supposedly an FRA inspector asked one time where he could use the bathroom on the locomotive when they were on the steam engine, and they told him, just go out the gangway. And apparently right here, the train makes, like I say, 180-degree turn. He's out the gangway on the wrong side, and everyone is, that's when all the attendants on the train tell, okay, go ahead and take your pictures outside. You can get the picture of the steam engine. So that was, is it true? I don't know. It's urban legend. I may be embellishing a little, but it's funny. Coconino Canyon again. And we're getting back out of the Pinon, back into the Ponderosa. Looking back at the train. I think it's a mirror shot, actually. So we did our duties at the Grand Canyon. We widened the train. We took our break. Here's looking back down at the switch at Imbaloo, looking back towards Williams. And you see, this is the same day. You see the lack of snow compared to this. So, it ain't much snow, but most of it's gone. And you can see the stair stepping effect coming down this hill. There's a good chunk of it, I believe it's 3%. There's looking down towards Anita. So here's looking at Miller's Wash towards wait. Dave, is that Kent? That's not the Peaks, right? That's Kendrick, right? Or Sickgraves? You know what I think it is? I think it's just because it's in shadow. I can't really see the edge of the caldera. So that's the highest point in Arizona. If it is the Peaks, it's 12,000 feet. It is a stratovolcano that blew up like Mount St. Helens. Same, landslide, all this stuff blew out sideways. If you look at a topographical map of the San Francisco Peaks and compare it to Mount St. Helens, you'll pretty much see the same thing. Wait, is that? That's not the same mountain. Okay, just making sure, because that's definitely not. So this is coming out of Miller's Wash, going towards Valley. I thought it was artistic. Looking back at the train. One dome car. Now, usually they'll have 3 short domes and 1 full length ex Great Northern dome on there. So they really try and upsell you on the dome seats. So there's looking back. This is, I believe this is what we used to call the Valley Speed Bump. And it's 2 short bumps in a row. And I wasn't an engineer at the time, so I didn't take notes. But the trick was to, if you were trying to run a 15-car train over it, keep the train stretched out enough so you didn't spill the drinks in the chief. So you can see we're cresting the 1 hump. You can see the next hump just ahead. If we make a right turn, you'd be in Valley. There's the second hump. There's climbing up out of, at least after the 25 curve. So this is the, one last 25 and make the last climb up to Red Lake. There's climbing up to Red Lake. See Bill Williams Mountain there as the far peak. So this was, I thought it was funny. Went out, they had locomotive problems, so they ended up using our Santa Fe Jeep 7, which just was not the best locomotive in the world. It was worn out, it was clapped out. But for some reason, here it is in Consist. Supposedly, we were never supposed to put it on the daily train, but again, here it is. That locomotive is currently out of service. So, because I know a lot of people are like, oh, you know, it's not a Jeep 7, it's a CF7, it's a former FU, and no, it's not. Everyone, because they think that high, you know, this high cab right here denotes that it's a CF7. It's not. You can actually, if you were to actually go up to it, you actually see the line where they welded this angle to raise the roof up for the air conditioner. So, because it has a dynamic brake blister, it's plated over. But another way to tell if it's a CF7, when they converted the CF7s from F7s into their road switcher, they had to reinforce the frame, which this locomotive doesn't have. I mean, it doesn't have the reinforcement. So, which, you know, because I get in arguments with rail fans about all the time, because they would be like, oh, well, Grand Canyon has their F40's label as F40FH. And they're like, well, it's really supposed to be a P, which stands for passenger. Well, we put freight gears under it so it can pull more cars up the steep grade, since top speed on the Grand Canyon is 40 mph. This is Desert View Watchtower. I think I pointed out earlier. This is actually built by the Santa Fe Railway. Has a steel skeleton underneath all this. It was erected by the Santa Fe Bridge Department. There's pictures of it as just a steel skeleton, but they went ahead and made it look like make it look au natural. So there's looking up at the ceiling. This was a Mary Coulter design building as part when she worked for Fred Harvey. This building is actually not currently being ran by Xanterra. So this is, I think, run by Delaware North now. So Xanterra is now the owner of the Grand Canyon Railway. About this time, Max Biegert sold it. Max and Thelma, the owners, sold it to Xanterra, which is owned by Philip Anschutz. This is a Desert View Watchtower from the outside. That same trip, I drove back Grand Canyon, got sunset at the crossovers. At the time, may still be this track 3, which was this one up above here in the upper right corner. That was the main line. So this was track 4. So generally the idea was to come in on track 3. If the train was too long, you came in on track 4. And if it was really long and didn't fit, because the platform was on my side of the track, we would actually push the train in, split it, pull half the train down, and then you would go in between the standing set of cars. Skate it, make sure it wouldn't roll, do a roll test. Waiting for the train. Here's a herd of elk, ran right in front of me. Yeah, Drove up to the top of, I believe it was High School Hill. So here's the train coming in from the Grand Canyon. You can actually see the Grand Canyon up at the top of the photo. So you can see there's the 6860, which was, that one has a HEP pass through on it. If you look on the roof line, you can see the conduit running through it. 6776, that's the one currently on display at the Grand Canyon Depot. And you can see some of the Boise buds here. You can see where the roof line, the bulge on the roof line was. And you can see they've also, this is when they started going to the black font on the coaches too. Another test run, this would have been 2008. This is the Dogtown Trestle, Cataract Creek. At the time, Eric was the new CMO. He started working with, they used some black tape to cover up the advertising on the tender. So this is kind of the first, proof of concept that, hey, we don't have to repaint the thing. Backing up, they ran out towards Red Lake and then they just came back to town. I don't know if it was the next day or a few days later. They went ahead, did a morning, all day run to the Grand Canyon. And if you ever watch my YouTube channel, you can watch this day and all its high or its DV8 video. Looks like it was shot with a potato. Thank God we have the stills. You can actually see what it looked like. So there's hooking up, walking around the train for the inspection. You got Phil Pete. He was he normally worked the shop, but he came work as a conductor that day. So here he is greasing up the journal boxes. So there's Pronghorn Ranch Road. I want to say that this was April, if not May. I know in May we had a couple good storms that year because it snowed on Cinco de Mayo, and I believe it snowed on May 25th. So here's working up the grade. Mike Brooks, who was the assistant train master at the time, him and I hiked into Coconino Canyon. So we got this shot. This is Bright Angel Creek. This is leaving Grand Canyon. And remember I said that the Grand Canyon is the highest point on the railroad and that there is no surface water or groundwater. When we have water here, you might ask, why is there water? We're downstream from the sewer plant. Santa Fe built everything at the Grand Canyon, including the sewer plant. And so after the water was treated, it was in Angel Creek. So if you're there, don't drink it. There's Woodin. That's just south of Anita. Again, it's one of those stations we didn't really use as for reference purposes, like for clearing stuff. It was there just mainly for the historical reasoning. Here's come up milepost 3. This is this is the last steep grade. If not, I think it may actually be the steepest grade on the railroad. It's Imballoo's more sustained. So going back about the same time, member 18 had gone to Mount Hood Railroad. Well, that was short-lived. It ended up in Alamosa for a while. So here it is on its first run next to Mount Blanca. So there's a nice little, so include it because, Grand Canyon. That was Grand Canyon's first steam engine. Going back, so this is as I'm leaving. I actually took a job with the Slurg for a little while before I ended up at Rail Runner and Amtrak. So this was kind of the swan song here, was the last shots here at Grand Canyon. So this was coming up milepost 3 again on a daily train. I think this is the only photo I have of a matched FPA set or FP set. So, and well, the power car behind it. So the first 3 locomotive or first 3 are all ex-Canadian National pieces of equipment. So looking back from the train in Coconino Canyon, this goes back to the joke about the FRA inspector having to use the bathroom on the steam engine. You can see why it was good. Passengers all stuck their heads out the window to get a picture going around this curve. It was one of the few places on the railroad where you could see the locomotive. And here I am in 2008 and been the selfie. So, yeah, that's scary. I think we need to burn that. This is actually my last run on the line. This was the Coconino Canyon Express, Coconino Canyon Flyer. For a brief time, we actually ran a train out of Grand Canyon. The idea was we could hit the tourist market for people staying the night at Grand Canyon. So we took 4 of the Harrimans up there, and we would run to Imbaloo, run around the train twice a night. And we used another Santa Fe Jeep 7 that we had picked up from the New Course Steel Mill, which is just west of Kingman. Paint it silver, give it a nice shiny paint job. I don't think I have a picture in this series, but so this was my last trip to Grand Canyon. So I figured I'll take my camera with me. So here we watch the daily train leave in the mirror. There it goes. Then after I took this picture, I would have gone down, lined the switch for the crossover. Here we are in Coconino Canyon. Here we are shoving back to, or well, not shoving back, but pulling back to Grand Canyon after we run around the train, run long hood forward. And here we are going home. Tried being a little artistic with the long exposure. And this is the last photo I ever took, I think, as an employee at the Grand Canyon Railway. We're somewhere, I want to say we're in Miller's Wash. So this would have been late June of 2008. And I never returned. Oh, no, I'm kidding. So here's some photos from, that went too far. Since I've been back, Dave, I think we were at the one on the left. You're the one on the, yeah. So that's hiking in Coconino Canyon. The one on the upper right's from, that's Coconino Canyon also, but the one on Bombs Milepost 3. This is after they brought the 29 back. When they Grand Canyon killed steam in 2008, the 29 was parked. They actually took it up to the canyon as for a display piece. And then as part of the, let's see here, 1916 would have been the, I think 1916 was the anniversary of the Park Service. So this, they brought it back in celebration of the Park Service, the 100th anniversary of the Park Service. And then they would keep running it until, they wanted to at least run it until 2019 for 100th anniversary of the Grand Canyon as a national park. Photo on the left, photo on the bottom right, during Pete Laro's charter. The one on the upper right is from near the shop during the team. The one on the left is Laro's. I mean, it's during Laro's charter. And then both the, I don't think those are the same bridge in Miller's Wash, but 2 different charters. The one on the bottom with the farewell to the 29 that Jim Wren put on in 2019. That was supposed to be the last runs before 29 went down for its 1472. There's the Dogtown Trestle at night. We took, Laro had them take the 29 and the 4960, double headed them up to the trestle, and we did a bunch of night photography. That is a single shot. I shot with like an f2.8 to, and a decent moon out, so we got stars frozen and everything. So the one up top on the left or on the right is that's the final sunset for the 29 under steam, and the one at the bottom's took her cut. Santa Fe actually derailed, I believe, a 210-2 in that cut at one time. And supposedly, I've also heard rumors that kids at the Grand Canyon got bored, built their own velocipede, and they found it in that cut one day off the track. Nobody around, but it's somehow, and that's about 4 miles. So it way down there before it jumped the rail. And the ends. You're still here. It's over. Go home. Go. Thank you. Oh, yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that they've that storm in 67, they attacked it from both. Santa Fe attacked it from both sides. They used their rotary from Albuquerque, but they also borrowed one of the SP rotaries from Donner Pass, and there's actually a picture floating around of an SP rotary in front of the Kingman station. So the FPA-4s were built by the Montreal Locomotive Works. They're originally Canadian National. They went to VIA. A couple of them went straight from, I think, VIA to the Grand Canyon Railway. That 6793 is the last streamlined cab unit built in North America. There was no 6794. And it actually ran on the Potomac Eagle before it came to Grand Canyon. Yeah. So if you go and find Trains magazines, salute to the Alco, Alco cab units from the 90s, you can actually see 6793 in a Missouri Pacific blue, same Potomac Eagle. Yes. I mean, they're a beautiful locomotive. As a railroader, I like the F40s better. The windows were better. They opened better. But I mean, let's admit, the FPA-4s just have that touch of class. That's just, I mean, they also didn't have air conditioning, so that was fun in summertime. And in fact, one day we lost the bell coming through Willaha. And so we reported to the dispatcher, Mike Hall. If you know who Zach Hall is with the 765, it was his dad was running the engine that day. And so he called the dispatcher, Eric, that day and told, well, the bell just fell off the, 6776. And, and so Eric replies, are you sure? He's like, well, I could stick Willie out there to see if it did, but. Oh. Oh, okay. For the interwebs series of tubes. Of what? I think it was just a statement about the FP4s, but I mean, the F40s are nice, dynamic braking. I mean, as a locomotive engineer, I'd much rather have that, especially air conditioning. I know it doesn't get warm. I mean, it gets warm in northern Arizona, but when it gets in the 90s and there's no wind, it's a little toasty. The FPAs didn't have that. The heaters actually ran off the engine coolant. So if they were a cold start, it was a while till you had heat in those things. So, but yes. At the time, now they have 5. 3X Amtrak, and then 2 from New Jersey Transit.
The question was how many F40s
Yeah.
operating? Yeah.
I see what we're doing now. Okay. But yeah, no, so the 3 Amtrak ones are 237, 239, and 295. I believe that 237 and 239 were originally designated F40 PHRs, which were rebuilds from SDP 40s that were turned into EMD. So they would take like the engine blocks out of the SDPs, put them in a new frame, stuff like that, reuse traction motors. Obviously the trucks, they weren't reusable. So chances are parts on the 239 and the 237 are actually older than what their builder's plate actually say. So 237's been refitted with a pony motor to provide HEP. So because one of the things with a F40 to provide HEP in a stock F40, you have to run the thing at notch 8 because the generator that generates the HEP is tuned to run at a certain RPM. So to provide propulsion to the wheels, you just send down a certain amount of electrical power that you request from the locomotive down instead of revving up the engine. So the engine runs at constant notch 8 to provide HEP. Those pony motors are completely separate. They're a little cat generator that's in the back of the locomotive, and the New Jersey Transit ones, one of them is 4128. I'm not quite sure what the other number is, but they were built with, or at least they came to Grand Canyon with the pony motors in them. So sometimes you won't see the power car on the Grand Canyon Railway today because those pony motors will provide enough HEP to run the train. Yes. "64 miles, 63.7, but there's one long mile in there, so we'll just say 64. Williams is about 6,700 feet. I believe the canyon is pushing 7,000, maybe 6,900 feet. I want to say Miller's Wash was 5,500 feet. Yeah, but it, you came down out of Williams, you dropped down to Miller's Wash, and you came up to Apex in Blue, went down to Coconino, then you made that last little jump up to Grand Canyon.
Did you also ask what is HEP? Is that what part of your
No,
question?
I'm sorry. You want to know HEP? Okay. It's head-in power or hotel electric power, depends who you ask. It's a 480 volt system we use to provide the onboard power for the train. So all your heating, ventilation, air conditioning, coffee makers, margarita mixers, all that stuff's run off the 480 volt. That's then stepped down to the proper voltage for the for its use. Want to say the question?
Question was, are there still some water stops or water spouts for refilling the steam locomotives?
No, I mean, no, there are no water stops. The only time they fill up with water is at Grand Canyon on a normal run. And what they do is they take a tank car and they take it and they spot it at the very end of the Y past Maswick. But to get there, it's not generally, you don't see it from the train. You got to know where it's at. You got to hike out to it. It's kind of off the beaten path, but they cut off the steam engine, they run it up there, and then they service it out of the view of the passengers. But they just use a gas pump to pump water from that tank car into the tender.
I don't know if we have any online questions. Can you guys tell, or Nathan or Keith?
I opened it up such that if anybody online has a question, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask.
Question was, where does the STEAM program stand right now?
As of right now, it's STEAM Saturdays. So the first Saturday of the month, they run STEAM. Right now, the last 2 STEAM Saturdays have been canceled, just mainly due to the drought conditions. It is dry. Water in the Williams area, there is no natural water. Everything comes from underground. You do have water that runs, you saw in the pictures, but there is no perennial water source. Everything in the area is groundwater. Pretty sure the neighbors don't like, I'm guessing this is not a official standing. They probably wouldn't like to see, Well, we can't water our, our crops, but we're going to run a steam engine. I guess. I don't know.
Tell us what the steam engines use for fuel.
Waste vegetable oil. So everybody go out, have some French fries tonight.
Do they source that locally, or do we know?
I believe they source it locally. Somebody else would have to chime in on that one.
Any other questions?
Bueller.
All right. Well, thank you, Will.
Oh yeah. So can we go to the baseball game? We still got. No, I'm kidding.
I think everybody's waiting around for hockey. So as we do with most years, there won't be a July meeting here. We'll take a month off, and I don't have an August program to announce yet, but stay tuned to your newsletter, and we will let you know. All right. Thanks everybody for coming. If you would put your chairs on the rack. What, Pat? Come up here and give us a Como update. Tell us what's going on with that engine.
Okay, so so the latest in Como, we had our finished our work week this last weekend. We did get the switch in that the grant was given for this year to buy those switch parts. That's in already, one of them. And then we've got the locomotive. They're just plugging away at it right now. They got all the tubes, new tubes ready to go in, and the flue. What's the head?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what's all
sheet,
being worked on. Flue sheet, tube sheet. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're drilling all that and then the tubes will go in and to that, and then be installed from there. And they still have the drivetrain to put together too. But I think the parts are all there for the most part. It just needs to be put together. So will it run on railroad days? The $1 million question. And I think there's probably some bets in Vegas on that one too. So
I guess there's a lot of volunteer hours being put in.
there's a lot of volunteer hours. The engine crew, we've actually do have a small version of like Cumbers and Tall Tech going now. We've got Norm from the Railroad Museum working on 4319, his little crew. Alex, my friend that I work with at my regular job, is now the roadmaster. And so he's kind of heading up the track crews. And that's mostly what I'm helping him with too. I kind of do a little bit of everything too. But what else do we get done? We're doing some work on the windows on the roundhouse a little bit, and possibly a new entrance in the rear there, and that Kirk had helped me years ago on that, putting in that fiberglass years ago and Dave came up way back, and that's going to get updated, and it's going to have like a small roundhouse door in the back and be a better entrance than the little side door we have now. The pit, we call it track or base 7 pit, is almost restored. We've got the timbers in for it. We're about to put rail on it, but we still have to do a little more mortar work on that. I've been working on the rail drill. We're drilling rail here and there, so slowly getting that going. So that's about it. So, we're hoping that it gets running on railroad day. If not, we'll probably have to do motor cars like we did last year, worst case, but that's about where we're at. So thanks.
Well, thanks for that update, Pat. Okay. I guess that about wraps it up. Like I said, we'll be back here in August, and have a good summer. Any other questions? All right. Yeah. Don't forget to put your seat backs and tray tables in their full upright and locked position. Okay.